When we practice sitting meditation, don't let the mind get drowsy, dozing off while sitting. Be aware of yourself. Whatever we do, be aware of ourselves. In the past, I went to learn with Venerable Put. He taught well. He said, when standing, walking, sitting, lying down, eating, drinking, doing things, speaking, thinking, be mindful. For instance, as we sit right now, be mindful. While moving, be mindful. When the mind thinks, be mindful of the mind. All kinds of mental suffering follow thoughts. Sometimes, our thoughts trouble us. Therefore, let's be mindful when we stand, walk, sit, lie down, eat, drink, while doing activities such as sweeping the floor, mopping the floor, driving the car, doing, speaking, and thinking. Be mindful. Therefore, when we move our body, when performing bodily actions, verbal actions, mental actions, most mental actions are thoughts. Be aware of them. In this way our practice can be continuous. From when we wake up till when we fall asleep, except for those times when we need to do work that requires us to think. For the rest of the time, whenever we have bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions, be aware of them. Bodily actions occur. The body stands, walks, sits, lies down, bends, stretches, turns left, turns right, because the mind commands the body. Verbal actions occur, good speech or bad speech, because the mind commands it to do so. The mind thinks before the body acts. Therefore, the essential factor for successful practice is to have mindfulness and to be aware of our own mind. If we have mindfulness and are aware of our own mind, defilements can't take over our minds. And then all our bodily actions and verbal actions will be good. Let's observe. A lot of suffering stems from our own thoughts. For example, someone cursed you by uttering just one sentence years ago, and you're still hurt from it. You are hurt every time you recall it. He cursed me. You feel hurt again and again. The cursing happened a long time ago, but our mind is still sad over and over again. Gradually learn our mind well. If the mind is good, then our bodily actions and words will be good. If the mind is bad, then our bodily actions and words will be bad. Sometimes, defilements push our mind. When anger pushes us, then our mouth taunts the person by using sarcastic or caustic language. Words are under the command of the mind. The mind thinks up bodily actions. Women would look sideways, slap, hit, or scratch. Men would punch, kick, or something like that. Because defilements take over the mind. When a defilement takes over the mind, not just anger, lust too can take over the mind. When a man talks to a woman, he would make his eyes flirtatious and add charm to his talk. He would fabricate his body and words to impress a girl. This is because defilements command him so. For those persons who have practiced to the point where defilements can no longer taint their mind, their bodily and verbal actions all arise naturally. They are just like the way they used to be. No pretense, no sugar-coated actions or words. They do what comes naturally. Therefore, among the bodily, verbal, and mental actions, the most essential one to remain aware of is our own mind. While being aware of our mind, we will see that sometimes the mind is happy, and then it suffers. Sometimes it's greedy and then not greedy. Sometimes it's angry and then not angry. Sometimes it's lost and then not lost. Sometimes it's restless and then sloth-like. The mind is constantly changing. It's impermanent. That point at which it is impermanent, it exists and then it's gone, is called a nijang. The point at which it is uncontrollable, it happens of its own accord, is anatta. For instance, a happy mind. We want to command the mind to be happy, but we can't. However, if we train our mind well, even though the mind is an anatta, uncontrollable, but the mind by nature is trainable. We can't command the mind to be happy, but we can practice and be adept at samadhi. Keep practicing samadhi, and the mind will be happy on its own. It's happy because we practice samadhi, not because we command it to be happy. Totally different approaches. Gently, a little by little, observe our own minds and persevere. Whenever we're lost, defilements arise. When we're absent-minded, we forget the body and mind. The mind wanders away. Defilements then interfere. As soon as the mind gets lost, it starts to fabricate as it has delusion already. The mind gets lost first, initially, lost state. Then, it thinks and fabricates. And then greed arises, then anger arises, etc. These states follow the initial, lost state. While we are angry, the mind is still lost. Whenever the mind isn't lost, it has mindfulness and wisdom. Defilements will cease right away. Let's gradually observe our minds, steadfastly. When it fabricates the good, the bad, happiness or suffering, just be aware of it. When it fabricates liking and disliking, just know it. Eventually, the mind will be equanimous. When our mind likes something, have mindfulness to cognize the liking, and the liking will cease. When our mind dislikes something, have mindfulness to cognize the disliking, and the disliking will cease. Consequently, the mind will be equanimous. We can't, all of a sudden, command the mind to be equanimous. The mind is an anatta. However, the mind, by nature, is trainable. We train to have mindfulness to cognize the liking mind or the disliking mind again and again. Later on, when the mind likes something, mindfulness will cognize it immediately, and the liking will cease on its own. The liking ceases, not because we command it to, but because we have mindfulness. Then, defilements will cease on their own, not because we command them to. Thus, the mind is anatta, not under our command or control. However, the mind by nature is trainable. Therefore, train the mind well. Gradually train the mind every day. Keep being mindful and learn about our own mind. It will gradually evolve. When we want the mind to rest, we can't order it to rest. The mind won't stop. It will keep thinking endlessly. So, instead of letting it think about 100 or 1,000 stories, let it think about one thing, e.g. to think Buddho, Buddho, Buddho continually, and don't think about anything else. When the mind stays with a single meditation object, soon it will be calm. It becomes calm when the mind stays with the meditation object that it is pleased with. When it isn't calm, this is because we have ordered it to be calm. Gradually notice that the mind is anatta, that is, neither under our control nor our command. However, the mind itself is a natural state that's trainable. So, train. If we generate this kind of cause, the effect will be conditioned accordingly. For example, if we generate a bad cause, for example, surfing the internet, scrolling on Facebook, or something like that, it means we train to generate the cause of restlessness. Sometimes craving interferes, sometimes anger interferes, while restlessness, that is, delusion, is the primary condition. with delusion as the primary condition. Craving or anger arises. If we have mindfulness to guard our minds, then, whenever defilement arises, mindfulness will cognize it right away. If cognition happens correctly, defilements will cease immediately. However, if cognition happens incorrectly, for example, when we see a defilement and want it to cease because we don't like the defilement, then this means that the mind isn't equanimous, but instead it is displeased. Thus, the defilement will not cease because a new defilement is occurring. That is, the displeasing defilement of anger has arisen. If we can read our own minds adeptly, then, when anger arises, and if the mind doesn't like it, then new anger arises on the heels of the first one. When we have mindfulness to cognize the displeased mind, it will then cease, and the mind will be equanimous. So, it will be seen that anger is something that arises, exists and ceases, and that it can't be prohibited or controlled. In this way, wisdom is attained. Practice gradually. Be mindful of our body, words and the mind, especially our own mind. Practice a lot, and the mind will be rooted in awareness, knower mind. It won't wander or get lost in pleasure or displeasure. When the mind is rooted in awareness, knower, the mind will be equanimous. It will see that phenomena come and go, and that bodily movements, standing, walking, sitting, lying down, come and go. The body breathing out arises, and fades away, and then, the body breathing in happens, and then it fades away. It will see that everything comes and goes, that non-form phenomena come and goes as well. Happiness happens and falls away, suffering happens and then falls away. When we keep observing in this way, the mind will gradually become equanimous, because it has gained wisdom from seeing the truth that everything arises, exists, and falls away. The mind will neither be lost in pleasure, nor will it be lost in displeasure. When the mind is neither liking nor disliking, it will be equanimous. Venerable Tate taught very well. He said, "One who has reached equanimity will transcend all kinds of suffering." Our mind still suffers, because it isn't equanimous. When the mind doesn't have a pleasing object, it wants a pleasing object. This is called kama tanha, sensual pleasure craving. When the mind wants a pleasing object, that point at which wanting arises, the mind is striving, it's suffering already. When it has a pleasing object, then it wants the pleasing object to last. This is called bhava tanha, craving for existence. When it meets a displeasing object, it wants the displeasing object to end or disappear. This is called vibhava tanha, craving for non-existence. We need to practice a lot in order to develop mindfulness and wisdom. In the beginning, we practice to develop mindfulness. When sensual pleasure craving arises, be aware of it. When craving for existence arises, be aware of it. When craving for non-existence arises, be aware of it. Then the craving will cease. Craving is the greed defilement. When craving arises, be mindful of it and it will cease. After it ceases, it will arise again. Keep persisting till the meditation practice is developed and wisdom is accrued. Then defilement will cease, not because of mindfulness, but because of wisdom. Wisdom is a tool to cut off and uproot defilements. Mindfulness can't really destroy defilements. Samadhi can't really destroy defilements. Samadhi, in fact, can easily be defilement's tool. However, wisdom arisen from seeing the truth will be able to uproot defilements. For instance, we can see that whenever the mind has craving, it is suffering. We observe further that craving is temporary, that suffering is temporary, and that we can't prohibit either craving or suffering from arising. We learn this gradually. We keep seeing and learning Dharma. Eventually, the mind will become equanimous. Then, when happiness arises, the mind with wisdom knows that happiness is temporary, and that it comes and goes. We can't hold on to it. When suffering arises, the mind with wisdom knows that suffering is temporary. It lasts for a while, then it will disappear. We can't chase it away. Even though we want it to last, it won't. It occurs due to its own causes and conditions. When the mind is wise, it will see that happiness is impermanent, suffering, and non-self. That suffering itself is impermanent, suffering, and non-self. The mind will be equanimous when happiness arises. The mind will be equanimous as a result of wisdom, because it understands that things do not last forever. Even though we get what we want, we can't keep it anyway. The mind will no longer thirst for happiness. Or when suffering arises, the mind with wisdom will see that if suffering is to arise, we can't prohibit it. If suffering has arisen, we can't chase it away. It's not under our control. This means we see anatta, non-self. Keep being aware of the suffering, and it will go away by itself, because it's a nijang, impermanent. When the mind is suffering, dukkha, the mind will not strive to get rid of it, as it knows that suffering is impermanent. When happiness arises, the mind will not strive to keep it, as the mind knows that happiness is impermanent. You see, when the mind has wisdom, it will be equanimous towards both happiness and suffering, to both the good and the bad. Happiness, suffering, good, bad are equal in terms of the three characteristics of existence. That is, they all arise and cease. When the mind sees the truth in this way, the mind will be equanimous as a result of wisdom. Consequently, when happiness arises, the mind will not be lost in gladness. When suffering arises, the mind will not be sad. The mind will be equanimous, as it understands that everything happens due to its causes, not because of our command. When the mind is equanimous, what would happen? The mind will not strive and fabricate. Therefore, craving can no longer create realms, bhava, for us. When craving exists, the mind is not equanimous. It keeps wanting this and that. When the mind has wisdom, it understands that everything is impermanent, that happiness and suffering are equal in terms of the three characteristics of existence, that the good and the bad are equal in terms of the three characteristics of existence. Once the mind comprehends in this way, the mind will be equanimous towards happiness and suffering, the good and the bad. The mind will understand that everything happens as a result of its causes and conditions, not because of our command. When the mind is equanimous, it will no longer strive. The mind strives because it lacks equanimity. Let's take a moment to notice. The mind strives because we keep liking or disliking something all the time. The mind is not equanimous, so it strives. As in the case of when we are sick, we become displeased with the sickness, so the mind strives and hence no peace at all. The equanimous mind understands that everything is equal, and so the mind will not strive, and it will not create realms, bhava. That point at which the mind becomes equanimous as a result of great wisdom is the door to enlightenment. At the moment of enlightenment, the mind transcends realms, mental striving and fabrication. That is, the mind strives and fabricates. When craving happens, striving happens. Craving is referred to as tanha upadana. To emphasize, mental striving is called realm, bhava. When realms arise, birth chati takes place, that is, the I and the mine arise, and then suffering dukkha arises. If we are wise, we understand that all kinds of phenomena equal, the mind will not have craving, and therefore will not create realms. If the mind doesn't create realms, then what will happen? Well, the mind will experience the thing that transcends realms. That is, it experiences nibbana. Therefore, no one can order the mind to enlighten. The mind is anatta. However, the mind is trainable. Train the mind to be wise, and it will understand that everything is equal. Then, the mind will no longer crave, no longer strive, no longer fabricate. The mind will become a natural state that senses, pure consciousness. It will only sense, and it does nothing else. Meaning, the mind will sense and will not fabricate any further. The mind will do so on its own, as we can't order the mind not to fabricate. When the mind no longer fabricates, it will transcend realms and realize nibbana. Nibbana is the state without fabrication, called visankhara. Nibbana is the state that transcends asava kilesa, influx, canker of defilement. It transcends the power of defilement. It transcends attachment to the aggregates, called vimutti, release, deliverance from suffering. We gradually learn, and eventually, our minds will realize transcendence and purity. Through awareness, we keep learning our mind's behavior. Sometimes, The mind is happy but soon it will suffer. Then it is good and bad. Keep observing it. When the mind isn't equanimous, that is, gets pleased with happiness, displeased with suffering, pleased with the wholesome, displeased with the unwholesome, just be aware of it. Then, the mind will be equanimous as a result of mindfulness. If we keep being aware in this way, later on the mind will be equanimous as a result of wisdom. The mind will understand that happiness, suffering, the good, the bad, are equal in terms of the three characteristics of existence. It will be equanimous as a result of wisdom. When the mind is equanimous as a result of wisdom, the mind will no longer strive and fabricate. The mind will transcend realms and realize Nibbana. Nibbana doesn't arise. Nibbana is the state that doesn't arise. And therefore Nibbana doesn't cease. That which arises, ceases. Practice gradually. Practice attentively every day. Don't hurry, but also don't be lazy. Walk step by step every day. One day, we will see the finish line in front of us. That point at which we see the finish line in front of us, we've attained Sotapanna, stream enterer, the point at which we walk towards our finish line. We are Sakadagami, once returner, the point at which we are about to reach the finish line. We are Anagami, non-returner. When we arrive at the finish line, we've reached Nibbana. When we've reached Nibbana, we will know that Nibbana is not anywhere else, but rather it has been right in front of us from the very beginning. However, as the mind has tanha, craving, that is, realm, mental striving, so Nibbana can't be seen. It's like having such bad eyesight that, even though gold, silver, and precious stones are in front of us, we just can't see them. So, practice gradually. Eventually, we will see the precious wonderful thing right in front of our eyes. We haven't seen it because defilement covers them up. There are defilements, craving, and striving in the mind. The mind constantly strives. It strives all the time. Sometimes, it wants to see. Soon, it wants to hear. Then, to listen, to smell, to taste, to feel tactile sensations, to perceive mental objects. It wants happiness, the good, etc. These are mental desires. Whenever the mind thirsts for something, the mind will strive towards it. Gradually observe that whenever the mind strives, the mind is suffering. Eventually the mind will transcend all kinds of fabrications and formations. Today, my Dharma talk was brief. About 20 minutes should be enough. Everything covered are the main points. If you understand what I have talked about, then meditation practice won't be a mystery any longer. To practice is not about Buddha, or the breath or anything of the sort. These are only tools. The essential point is to be mindful of our own mind well enough. And then the rest will follow. That's why meditation masters have said, if we can reach the mind, we will reach the Dharma. If we can't reach the mind, we can't reach the Dharma. So, practice. Next, review homework.
Number 1. Regarding formal meditation, I practice mindfulness of breath. When I look into my hands, I see bones. During the day, I see anger rise and cease. My husband just passed away. When I'm home alone, my mind feels terrified. I can't stay home alone. Recently, I've been rather restless. I think a lot. Please, Venerable Master, kindly suggest meditation guidance that is suitable for me.
The mind is still sad and not equanimous. It mourns the past, thinking this and that. We can't prohibit it, but we can cognize it. Do you notice that all suffering and sadness come after thoughts? Thinking of the past, we get sad. If we're mindful of the present moment, then when we see the mind think, just be aware of it. When we see that the mind is sad, let's be aware of it. When we see the mind wanting to get over the sadness, be aware of it. What am I going to do to get over it, to get over this suffering? In fact, we don't need to do anything. Suffering is impermanent. No one is suffering forever. If we practice, it means we don't just leave it to fate, that is, wait for the pain to go away by itself. We train our mind, keep being mindful of our mind. Just like what I taught earlier today, you can just put that into practice. All suffering arises after thoughts. Thoughts arise when the mind is lost. Lacking mindfulness, it's lost in thought. When the mind is lost in thought, and if we are mindful of it being lost, then thought will cease. Then suffering has no food, thought, to nurture it, no place, thought, to arise from. The mind will be equanimous. The Buddha taught us thousands of years ago that birth, aging, sickness and death are normal. However, we can't accept the ordinary. That is, our mind does not accept the ordinary. As a result, the mind craves or thirsts. It thinks of the past, or something like that. Consequently, the mind is suffering. Therefore, suffering arises from causes. The mind doesn't suffer out of nothing. When we don't think about this loss of husband, we think about fun things, there is no suffering. Instead, the mind is happy or having fun. Therefore, no one causes us to suffering. The mind suffers because it has no mindfulness to be aware of what's happening. So, the mind is lost in thought. What I taught earlier today. Listen to it again and again. Then, observe the real phenomena. One day, we will be able to get over this suffering. We must not leave it to fate, however we will get over it as a result of mindfulness and wisdom.
Number 2. What I've been practicing is giving alms every day. Sitting meditation for 40 minutes. 30 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. And listening to morning chant and evening chant via MP3. Do I practice correctly or do I need to change anything, Venerable Master?
Correct. There is nothing bad in what you've been doing. Giving alms is good. Chanting is good. Listening to chants is still okay. Sitting meditation and walking meditation are all good. It's all good. Even though we are good, we can still develop our wholesomeness further. Whatever we do it with awareness, and observe our own mind. Why do we practice all these good things? Is it because we want to be happy? Is there any kind of wanting behind it? Do you want to be good? Or want to attain path and fruit? All kinds of wants are tanha, craving. Our physical actions and words are from our mind. So, observe our mind. Is it under the command of craving? For instance, giving alms. Why do we do that? Investigate it. If we give alms in order to decrease our defilement, that's the best. But if we do that because we expect to get enlightened easily, that isn't wise. It's merit, na, but not wholesome, kasala, not wise. Doing good deeds is merit-making. Wholesomeness is conditioned by spiritual wisdom, that is, to understand causes and effects. Therefore, we practice sitting meditation. What is the reason behind it? Gradually observe. Is it because we want to be good? If so, that's tanha, craving. Investigate yourself. Practice gradually. Consequently, when we practice, the mind will be relaxed, not stressed. You won't force yourself and become stressed or drowsy. Let the mind work and be mindful of it. When we practice sitting or walking meditation, or when listening to chants or giving alms, observe our mind. What is the reason behind our actions? Keep being aware of the mind, and then we will progress more.
Number 3. Previously, I chanted Buddha as my meditation object. However, when the mind was lost in thought, I couldn't notice it. When the mind was still and restful, I couldn't notice it. Currently, I change to breathe in, chant Bud, breath out, chant Do, count 1, and continue so until 100. It turns out that I can notice when the mind is lost in thought. So, I can see that the mind is lost in thought very often, and also understand that lost in thought mind is uncontrollable. During the day, I try to think of the word Buddha as often as I can. Regarding my practice, is there anything I need to be concerned about, sir?
Your practice is correct. When you practice correctly, you need to practice enough, and often. Keep being mindful. Your practice is good. Aggregates are separated out. The mind is bright, wieldy, malleable, proficient, and not dull. It looks good. Keep learning. Learn within our body and mind.
Number 4. My practice is running for an hour in the morning and chanting Buddho, Susuto, Karunamahanavo. While I walk around to see my staff working for half an hour, I try to be mindful. After lunch, I listen to Luangpu's YouTube and practice sitting meditation for half an hour. When I'm back from work, I chant the mantra for half an hour. Last year, Luangpu told me I already have the knower mind. The question is, it seems like I can't see the 3 characteristics of existence often. How to practice to progress to vipassana, sir?
Actually, the mind can do vipassana already. Aggregates are all separated out. Just keep seeing them work. When the mind is lost in thought, be aware of it. No matter how the mind is, be aware of it. Your practice is good. Practice more. Keep on practicing. Just don't be greedy, that's all. The mind is still greedy.
Number 5. I watch the breath and also feel the whole body as my meditation object. While I practice formal meditation, I see the restless and uncomfortable mind arise and cease on its own. I feel pleased. I understand that I still can't separate the aggregates. During the day, I can be aware of my body and mind often. I know I want to be good, and I'm lost often. Please Luangpu kindly teach me and give me the meditation object that is suitable for my temperament, sir.
Being aware of your own body is good. Be aware of your own body, not the bodies of others. If you watch the bodies of others, defilement will arise. Be aware of your own body as your meditation object. Later, when the mind wanders away, the mind will be able to see it by itself. Your practice is good, but the mind is off its base, not truly rooted in awareness. It's still a little off. Therefore, keep being aware of your own body. Do not watch the body, just feel your own body often. Then the mind will become the knower, and then it will be able to cultivate wisdom. Your practice is good. Don't watch the bodies of others. Be aware of your own body.
Number 6. My practice in daily life feels more natural. The aggregates are separated out without intention. I can see this clearly when I move my body. I can see feelings arise and cease. The problem is my awareness and samadhi are still weak. Please Luangpu kindly give me advice on meditation guidance and how to cultivate samadhi, Venerable Master.
To cultivate samadhi, we need to practice. Let the mind stay with one meditation object, and when the mind strays away from that object, be aware of it. For example, when we breathe in, chant Hut, breathe out, chant Do, or we practice to be aware within the body, and when the mind wanders out, be aware of it. Samadhi will improve. Right now, the mind is stuck in focusing. That is, forcing itself to be still. You're controlling the mind. Therefore, practice to stay with your meditation object, and when the mind wanders out, keep being aware of it. Then, good samadhi will be attained. Good samadhi means the mind does not focus, watch, or feel uncomfortable. Now the mind is uncomfortable, because you're focusing. So, stay with your meditation object, and when the mind wanders out, know it. If we can practice in this way, then later on morality, samadhi and wisdom will arise automatically. We need to have a meditation object for the mind, and be aware when the mind moves away or changes. Keep on practicing. Then the mind will be rooted in awareness, and be able to cultivate wisdom. Now, the mind is wandering out to think. Know that it wanders out to think.
Number 7. I use the breath and bodily movements as my meditation object. I can be aware during the day. I'm lost sometimes. I see the mind arise and cease, and see the new mind arise. I'm aware of the mind when it is pleased or displeased. I can see the craving as well as conceit clearly. When I saw my intelligence outstripping my spiritual wisdom, then I felt sad, and then the Dhamma fabrication decreased. Please Luangpu kindly advise and give me homework, Venerable Master.
You're wise, as you know what's wrong. Intelligence outstripping spiritual wisdom isn't right, it's mental fabrication. If intelligence outstripping wisdom happens, we should increase our samadhi, and let the mind stay with the meditation object. Don't worry about wisdom. Wisdom is only a tool, not something that we need to hold on to. Wisdom's duty is to cut off defilements. We don't need to hold on to wisdom. Don't be afraid that we will not be wise. Knowledge is the burden for the mind. Just keep being aware in the present moment. When you do so, your mind moves back and forth. Then, be aware of the mind that moves back and forth. Keep practicing. Keep being aware of the mind. It will get better on its own. Just be careful when you practice. Don't let the mind be drowsy. Don't let delusion take over your mind. When aware, be aware in a knowing manner. Be aware in an awakening manner, and be aware in a cheerful manner. Now, let your mind revert back. Revert back. Okay, stay there. Don't let it slip. Stay there, then you will see all kinds of phenomena come and go, come and go. Don't interfere with them. Now, you're lost in thought. Be aware that the mind is lost in thought. Finally, the mind will be the knower mind. It will see phenomena come and go. Be aware in this way.
Number 8. I practice by chanting mantra and being aware of the lost mind. Alternately, I recite words. In daily life, I have a stressful, high-pressure job where I can't make mistakes. Before I start the stressful work, I escape to chant mantra for a little while. I think I just escape the stress by doing samatha, calmness meditation. If I contact a displeasing object and if I am not aware of it, I will be furious. Please Luangpu kindly suggest the meditation practice that is suitable for me, Venerable Master.
We can see the defilements that we have. That's good. Don't think that the mind, has to be good all the time. Defilements can't be prohibited. They come up and go away. Regarding chanting mantra before work, this is calmness meditation, and that's good. If our minds have samadhi, we will work better, correctly and precisely. If our mind is restless and distracted, if it's stressful, our work won't be good, because stress depletes our energy a great deal. Therefore, practice to pay respect to the Buddha, chant the mantra, spread loving kindness regularly. Whenever you have time, just chant mentally, without any expectation, neither for goodness nor anything else, but instead chant for the mind to have an abode of merit. When the mind is relaxed and light, if we start working, then we can work well. If we work in a stressful manner, that's suffering. So, train our minds. Chant a short mantra. Keep chanting whenever we have time. We don't chant for happiness, calmness, or goodness. Rather, we chant without expectation. And then, the mind will be calm by itself, happy by itself, and rooted in awareness by itself. If we do it with greed, when is it going to be calm? When is it going to gain energy? Then it won't be calm. This will waste the energy of the mind. Keep observing. Do you notice that the mind moves back and forth? It moves and changes, and we can't contain it. Chanting a mantra. So that your mind won't be stressful while working. That's correct. That's good. Keep doing it. Then, we will be happy at work and not stressed. If we work stressfully, it means we're already in hell alive. If we work happily, we are in heaven alive. That's all for today.